You are watching FinTech Talk, sculpting the future with AI, crypto, and FinTech.
Welcome, FinTech Talkers. This is your host, Patty. Every once in a while, an entrepreneur doesn't simply build a successful company. They help define an entirely new category. Today's guest is one of those entrepreneurs. Bhaskar Sunkara represents the classic Silicon Valley founder who doesn't move from one startup to another, chasing trends. Instead, he continues to iterate on the same fundamental problem across multiple companies. Each time, moving one layer higher in the enterprise technology stack. As the founding CTO of AppDynamics, or AppD for short, Bhaskar helped pioneer the category of enterprise observability, transforming applications from black boxes into observable systems by connecting application behavior to customer experience and business outcomes in real time. AppD grew into one of Silicon Valley's iconic enterprise software companies before its $3.7 billion, that's with a B, acquisition by Cisco. Today, Bhaskar is building Bicycle AI, taking that thinking one step further, from observing applications to observing the business itself. Bicycle's vision isn't simply better analytics or another AI copilot. It's what the company calls agentic analytics, a system that continuously detects business signals, explains root causes, recommends action, and learns from outcomes to help enterprises improve revenue and operational performance. Today, we'll explore not just Bicycle AI, but what the future enterprise looks like when AI moves from answering questions to helping run the business. Bhaskar, welcome to FinTech Talk.
Thanks, Patty. Thanks for having me. And that was a really solid intro. Thanks for that.
Oh, well, you deserve it. And I did a little research, and you have a great background. So looking forward, and maybe we'll start with that. Yeah, we'll start with that background. So let's start with your story. You grew up surrounded by engineering and technology, taught yourself programming at a young age, and have now spent decades solving increasingly complex enterprise problems.
Correct.
Looking back, what has been the common thread that connects AppDynamics and Bicycle AI?
Yeah, great question to start with. I think for me, the common thread is pretty simple. I was always kind of looking at like when software is the core to running your business, when software is defining your business, what is the core metric that you really use to run the business with? And then also like, how do you sort of keep that metric going, right? Like whether it's sort of like response time for how quickly you're able to check out, or it could be like a revenue metric or something like that, right? Like so because what happens is when you look underneath the surface on what's driving that metric, it just looks like very complex, looks like a black box. So how do you demystify that? So that's what really always, fascinated me. With AppD, the core system, the black box was the application, right? Because every company was really becoming a software company, but because the application was a black box, when something was slow, something was broken, people had like all these traces, logs, dashboards, all sorts of tooling, but they still struggled to answer the question on, is revenue at risk? Like, what should we focus on? Is it actually affecting customers or not? So that's what we really solved with, AppD. The two things we did. One is we made sort of the unit of measurement something that people can relate to. So we coined the term business transaction, and like right now, everybody kind of just uses that for observability. And the business transaction is basically like a unit where it represents some sort of customer experience, right? Like, so you're logging in, you're adding items to cart, you're doing a payment, you're doing a booking. That is the unit. And that's what stays constant, right? So that's kind of AppD. But now if you, like you said in the intro, if you move a layer up, the black box becomes the business itself. So the KPI you're tracking is revenue, and you can track revenue by different segments, like, my product, my region, multiple different segments like that. But the point again is a retailer, let's say they see a drop in conversion, or you're looking at like fall in bookings, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a ton of data similar to how, the technical folks had, right? Like metrics, traces, dashboards. There's a ton of data. There's like a lot of, data in the warehouse. But the hard part is still the same, right? What changed? Why did it change? How much does it matter? Does it even matter at all? Is it real? What should we do next? So the common thread, if you think about it, is that you have the signal and you have the decision, right? How do you cut down the time, and the difference? That's the similarity, but the difference is basically in AppD it was technical signal to action, and with Bicycle it's business signal to action. So that's kind of the difference.
Yeah, no, I love the thinking, and I remember Andreessen or Mark Andreessen talking about software is eating the world, but you've
Yeah,
taken that like 10 notches further, right? Yeah, software might be eating the world, but
yeah,
how do you optimize it? How do you measure its performance? And AppD, obviously, a little bit of technical signals, but
yeah,
now you're saying, yeah, every business is operating on software, but
yeah.
how do you optimize? How do you improve? How do you measure and then engineer? Because as
Basically,
an engineer by trade, if you
yeah,
can measure, you can improve. So
hundred
I
percent.
like your thinking, that it's even further than, with
Absolutely.
all respect to Mark, but he's a great guy
Yeah,
and has all
yeah,
these lovely quotes. But you've taken that thinking further and shown it with your startups.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Appreciate that. Yeah,
Cool. So was it always logical? I kind of use this in the
yeah.
intro, right? Silicon Valley. I know Subra Iyer. He did a WebEx, and
Perfect. Yeah,
coincidentally, he sold it to Cisco too.
yeah.
And then he did Moxtra, and I think he's rebranded something, and which is kind of WebEx next gen, if you will.
Sure,
And
sure,
he had an investment in Zoom too. So I kind of use that as an iconic Silicon Valley, right? You go
for
through
sure.
every phases rather than
Yeah,
change.
yeah,
So
yeah.
was Bicycle always the logical next chapter for App Dynamics, or did something fundamentally change in the enterprise, or was
Sure.
it this AI explosion that made you realize
Yeah.
that business needed a different kind of platform?
Yeah, I mean, hindsight, definitely now I have like an easy thread tying it. Hindsight, when I look at it, it looks very, very logical. But, I don't know if it was obvious from day one, right? Because, after AppD, one of the patterns that I kept seeing was I was seeing the same pattern in business teams that I was seeing in engineering teams earlier. And what that pattern was that there are a ton of tools, right? Like there are dashboards, warehouses, BI teams, like all sorts of uh, data sort of like manipulation, orchestration, data observability, tons of stuff like that. But when someone said, okay, why did payment approvals fall for this segment? As we started talking to, let's say, leaders in payment, and the answer is always was always an investigation, right? Like someone pulls data, you check dashboards, you're on Slack, you're asking product, you're asking engineering, you look at the recent changes, like did auth rules change? Did like a new deployment goes in? It's kind of a constant struggle, right? So the need was always there, right? But I think AI, obviously, like I said, the explosion part was it made a different shape for that possible because early on, analytics was all about just helping people look at data, right? And honestly, data is just interesting only when it moves, and that's one of the fundamental pieces of Bicycle that we focus on the movements. But with AI, you can build a system that actually watches the right business signals. Then, when you have an important signal, that's when the job starts, and then you reason through likely causes and then really package the next action out, right? Like, so that's the high level. But just tie it back to what made it possible. I think the AI explosion was great, but a model is not gonna, magically understand your business, right? Like it doesn't understand what conversion means inside of your company and how you look at it. There's a lot of context there. It doesn't know the difference between, what's a good decline or a bad decline, in payments, what actions are safe, etc. So a couple things really kind of helped us. Number one, when we built the core system that actually can look at the business KPIs and works through it. One of the heavy lifts was the onboarding because like the understanding part is very, very like important. And so that's the phase one of AI when the language models came in. The language models function really as a business analyst for Bicycle. So think of Bicycle as a business analyst and a data analyst in a box, right? Because the business analyst basically figures out like the understanding of the business, and the data analyst is a data expert that's crunching the data. But the instructions have to flow through from the business analyst to the data analyst. So that's what phase one of AI made possible. It's basically like the whole aspect of um, the models actually understanding the business enough. Then the second aspect of it was the agentic part of it was that's when the reasoning layer on top of businesses that really took off, right? Because when you want to really analyze why a metric is moved, why conversion is down, there's a number of technical factors and business factors associated with it. Technical factors are much more machine readable if you think about it, right? Like there's latency, there's error rate, there's response time, and everything else. But the business part is tricky, right? Like you have like rules, you have contracts, you have like inventory, you have like pricing information. How do you like really reason through that? It's not telemetry, right? And the reasoning part and sort of like that next layer really helped demystify it and made that possible. So that's how we're like now able to say, okay, I can actually go from signal to action, um, and really complete that loop.
Yeah, no, lot to unpack there. So you introduced a
Yeah,
lot of terms, and maybe we need to define some of these
yeah,
too. So
yeah,
we talked about the root cause analysis part, kind of create that causality, because every time a business is looking, why is this happening
absolutely.
and what happened?
Hmm.
And then of course that goes back to metrics. So if payments are not
Yeah,
getting processed, the example you took. So a lot of it is kind of metrics or KPI based. And
yeah,
then
yeah,
you kind of alluded to a semantic aspect, right? The
yeah, yeah,
onboarding,
yeah,
understanding the business. So I'd love to drill down on that as well. And I
yeah.
love your kind of statement, and that's deep. And let's maybe kind of double click or drill down on that as well.
Sure.
That Bicycle is both a data analyst
Yeah,
and a business
business
analyst
analyst. Yeah,
in a box to a
yeah,
business too. So
yeah,
help our audience understand that. So today's business, and you focus on certain verticals, maybe you can use it in the
yeah,
context. So
yeah.
who does that today before the agentic Bicycle is helping, or is it just augmenting how that happens today in the business?
Yeah, I mean, right now, obviously, it's the analyst's job, right? Like, so the data and the analytics team, it really kind of owns data, curates the data, makes sure like the pipelines are working, the data is being collected, etc. But a lot of it is tribal knowledge, right? So you'll have somebody who is responsible for when conversions dropping, when payment approvals are dropping. Like, what do you basically do? What are the different systems it touches? Because it can be happening to a variety of reasons. It could be happening because of technical reasons, like something got deployed. There's an issue with the application. It could happen due to business factors like pricing or inventory, or like you changed fraud rules or whatever, right? Like or it's some different issue or behavior than before. And it can happen due to a lot of like, external factors also. It could be market factors, it could be weather, when you're booking tickets and things like that. So the analyst really owns that. And for us, I think what we're really trying to do is to capture the essence of the analyst and try to really become a power tool for him, right? Because you can't really replace an analyst, right? Like, because the analyst has all the pieces together. And what we essentially did was build something that's the equivalent of a cursor or a Claude code for the analyst, right? Because a cursor or a Claude code, for a developer is a power tool. It multiplies their impact. It doesn't sort of replace them. And that's what we did for the analyst, because you are the person who's still figuring out, what systems does it touch? Like, how do I tune it? How do I make sure that all systems that the AI needs to touch, whether it's the pricing systems or the inventory systems or the logs or the telemetry, is accessible to AI, and you're defining that strategy in an efficient manner. So that's kind of what we did, but it's typically done with the analysts, and it's a lot of tribal knowledge. And one of the things companies struggle with is as the business grows, they have to keep hiring X number of more analysts every quarter, every month, because that's the only way to do it. And obviously, that's one of the big problems in making decisions with data that I think AI can scale and really help with.
Right. So analyst is typically a support group and it serves marketing, it serves the operational groups, and
Just
maybe it
revenue. Yeah,
serves the CEO revenue
absolutely.
and
They
serves
do.
the CEO and the
Yeah,
board. So
yeah.
and like you said, it's a very reactive, like each of those
It's very reactive. Yeah.
businesses define some
Manual,
requirements.
tribal.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
very manual, many very tribal. And you're kind of making that not only efficient, but
yeah.
also kind of in real time,
In
proactive
real time
almost.
and repeatable. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Totally.
Awesome. And in essence, I think we covered what Bicycle does, right?
Yeah,
And so it's instead of the human analyst, or the human analysts are still there, but you're
yeah,
giving them power tools
yeah,
and their agents themselves, like you took the example cursor and cloud code, but
yeah,
it's the agent or analytical agents, it's
yeah.
powering them to do root cause
Totally.
analysis and react in real time. Is that how
Yeah.
Bicycle
I
operates?
Yeah, I can kind of zoom out and look at the big picture in some sense and like maybe talk through that again if that works, right?
Sure.
Because I feel like if you zoom out, what is the big shift that's really happening? I feel enterprise software itself is moving from, tools you operate to actually creating systems that operate part of the business loop with you, part of the business with you. Because if you look at the last couple decades or so, right, like software has really like, I mean, obviously there's a lot of like these wrapper discussions, etc. But software has really helped us store or visualize, just collaborate around things. Whether that's CRM, BI was showing like business metrics and observability was showing the, system health, etc. And then, there's ticketing and stuff like that that tracks work, helps you collaborate, there's Slack for messaging, etc. But the decision making loop was still very, very human, right? Like very human heavy. And I think what happens with that is that, when something changes, someone notices it, someone has to ask why, someone goes in, does the investigation, someone picks up the response, and it's sort of like everywhere, right? Like whether you take retail, travel, payments, etc., it's kind of everywhere. What Bicycle does is like how do you fit in that decision loop, right? And the reason we call it agentic analytics, and it's still an evolving term, everybody has their own interpretation. And for us, it's not merely just asking a question, right? The system doesn't wait, for you to ask a question, doesn't wait for a question. It continuously looks for meaningful big business signals, focuses attention on what matters, explain likely causes, and recommends next action. So yeah, so you can call it like an agentic business analyst coupled with the, a very strong sort of data analyst, in the background. But maybe just one thing to point out is that it's not just answering questions, because a good analyst understands the business, knows what matters. It's basically understanding the operating context well enough, so it's actually helping you run the business better. So as part of that overall transformation that's happening from just tools you operate to building systems that operate the loop or the business.
Yeah, no, that's really very powerful. It gives
Yeah,
a great tool to keep it kind of operating
absolutely.
and efficient. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Um, yeah,
a
good.
quick segue, and you were no, if you have a point, go ahead and make it. I was
No, no,
going to go
I was
to your
just
verticals. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, I was actually just um, maybe trying to do like a concrete example of like what is the engine?
That's
Like
where I was going. So go. Yeah.
yeah, 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 absolutely. Because the way we think about it is that a easy way to think about what Bicycle does is detect, explain, act, and learn, right? So just the acronym is DEAL, right? Like so, DEAL is sort of like an easy way of thinking about it. Detect is the first step, right? When you're looking for meaningful business signals, detect is the thing that's looking for meaningful business signals. What changed, right? Because not every change is meaningful, not every change matters. revenue, conversion, authorization, inventory availability, everything, right? The system has to know what is normal, has to figure out like what is seasonal, what is explainable, etc. So once you detect that, there's a sub step before you can explain, you kind of focus. Like, what is the focus area that, like, for example, if say payments are failing in California, right, and not sort of everywhere. So first of all, you are fine grained enough to say this slice, maybe they're failing in San Francisco. It's actually like a much smaller space. Maybe they're failing only on a particular iOS version and they're failing only for a particular, card provider, right? That is focus. So now you take that focus and then you start going to the explanation part. So this is the E part, right? Like the off deal. It's not just correlation. It's not enough to say conversion dropped and something else increased, etc. But you need to reason through evidence. Now, evidence is in multiple systems, right? And the questions you're asking is it one device? Is it a particular geography? Is it a particular payment method? Did a routing rule change? Did a partner start failing? So reasoning starts when the system can connect the pattern to likely causes, but also ruling out explanations that don't sort of like fit, right? And you're then showing the business, the evidence in their language, and that's sort of like the E part. The A part is basically where the act is you have to be very careful because you cannot automate every action, right? Some actions are safe and reversible, so it's about safety, reversibility, guardrails, and some have like higher risk, right? But the right model, it's not that you're saying, hey, AI is going to do everything, but you have to be very careful about that. So AI can create a ticket, no problem. It can notify the right owner. It can draft a message, et cetera, et cetera. So low risk actions is fine, but higher risk actions, there has to be reversibility. It has to be sort of like human approval and judgment. And then the last piece is learn, which is the closed loop. If we did that action, if we explain that, was that accurate? Did it work? Did the metric kind of get back? That is the difference fundamentally between analytics and then you're actually creating an operating layer for decision making.
Gotcha. So it's a feedback loop that
Correct.
it's building more intelligence for the future.
Absolutely.
Right. No, I love deal, and it's almost the
Hmm.
life cycle of the analyst,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and but your agent is doing it. It's doing it proactive, and I'm
Correct.
assuming it has access to all the operating data in real time or near real
Sure.
time,
Yeah.
and it can detect things in the night and stuff. And
Absolutely.
I love the human in the loop as needed. And is that
Yeah.
all kind of configurable? I'm assuming in the system as to what
Yeah.
actions can be. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is basically we recommend, because our business analyst will recommend things. And then as an analyst, you can then say, I want to tweak this, I want to tune this, I accept this change as is. But we do 70 to 80% of the work, right? Like whether it's onboarding, whether it's wiring up what to watch for, but it's all configurable and it's kind of very similar to it's like the cursor for analysts.
Gotcha. So
Yeah.
let's close it down with some maybe real world example. You talked
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
payments a couple of times. So
Yeah.
you operate in certain verticals, but I think
Verticals.
you can operate in any vertical. So talk a
Yeah.
little bit about verticals and maybe touch on some
Yeah.
high impact cases or use cases.
Yeah. Yeah, so what I can do is like I can talk through like the logic of why we picked sort of these three verticals, and then if you have time we can actually go into a use case each. But we focus on those three, right? Like retail, travel, and payments because they share the same basic shape. They're high volume. They're time sensitive. Decision making is sort of super important. They've direct impact on P&L. And usually the cause of business movement is very fragmented and spread across multiple systems, right? So take retail. If you have a conversion drop, what are the different things that could cause it? Like inventory, search relevance, pricing, promotions, shipping promises, traffic quality, issues with checkout, with applications, etc. So all of those are potential issues. Take travel. Booking conversion might be because supplier availability, drift in price, it's a stale price. Again, payment failures. Payments almost like adjacency with travel and retail. Um,
Right.
partner latency, actual market demand. Your competitor has better prices, etc. Payments. Authorization might be sort of like suffering because it could be issuer behavior. 3DS sort of routing. It could be gateway performance that could be affecting it. It could be merchant config, right? So in all three industries, if you think about it, small percentage changes matter because the volume of transaction is pretty large. And you can't sort of like if you contrast that with B2B, for example, if you have some insights which are analytical and which are hurting your business, a lot of times it'll hurt your business only like next quarter or next year when the renewal is due or whatever else. You can't afford that in these businesses because anytime something's happening, even if you have like a half hour of something not working well, it is going to impact revenue for that half hour. And that's the reason why these are good markets. They don't really need more dashboards. Like they need a faster way to detect, what changed, figure out like why that's happening and, and act safely. So that's like why we pick the verticals. Yeah. So, I mean, we can definitely go into use cases for maybe all three, or we can pick one. Yeah, we could definitely go deeper if
Yeah,
that
yeah.
makes sense.
That
Yeah,
one maybe depth that I wanted to explore, and
yeah,
I'm not very familiar with the
yeah,
state of AI transformation in retail and in travel, except that I
hmm
did write about that Long Lake acquisition, but they're still going through American Express Travel.
yeah,
How much in the businesses you work with in retail and travel, for example, and also payments, how much of AI is already in the operations? So
yeah.
are you dealing more with software and the data that the software is creating? Or in some cases, there is AI and agents and the automation. And I know it might be a parallel journey. They might be
Yeah,
automating certain things. So how much
yeah.
of that is what you're seeing and how does it impact you, if at all it does?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing is that there is definitely a bunch of AI activity going on, but a lot of it sometimes is to do with customer experience, right? Like for example, in travel, I think customers are figuring out like how does a customer use AI to get to the ticket they want and things like that, right? In payments, they're making commerce easier. In retail also, how do you find the right item? How do you search for it, et cetera, et cetera. And because with what we're doing is under the hood and internal operations and efficiency and revenue protection, the overlap there is a little less, but we do see a bunch of AI happening in working with data, et cetera, as well. But a lot of it is like pretty early stage. And people are also realizing it's not as simple as throwing an LLM on top of your warehouse. That's just like a bad idea. In fact, Anthropic just came out with an article, which basically says, look, throwing Claude on top of the warehouse is a bad idea because there's so much more work to be done. And so they were writing this article for their own internal self-service agentic analytics. But that actually is a really, really good article. But yeah, does that kind of give you a picture of like what we see right now and like, and what we sort of like really work with?
Totally, totally. And
Yeah,
I'll reference the article, Anthropic article in the show
yeah,
notes. But
yeah,
thanks for
of
bringing
course.
that up. I want to go back to something you said around onboarding, right? And
Yeah.
how important that is, kind of your customer
Yeah,
onboarding, or for your system to learn about the
sure,
client.
sure.
And
Yeah,
as I have been researching agentic AI, one concept keeps coming up, the semantic layer,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Everyone talks about foundation models, but
yeah,
increasingly it feels like the real differentiators, how
yeah,
well AI understands that business. And
yeah,
and you kind of echoed it. So I want to ask you this. How do you think about that semantic layer?
yeah. No, that's a great question. And I think that's what actually starts going into making some of this real, especially for a business, beyond sort of like doing like really basic use cases. I think it's one of the most important parts, but I feel like people, when they typically define it, they define it too narrowly. A lot of times people just think about it as a set of metric definitions, and that's just not enough, right? Because if an agent needs to be useful in a business, um, it's not just about understanding, what's the definition of revenue, what's the definition of conversion. It's much more beyond that, right? Because they need to understand some of the core events, some of the core things that happen. So you need to understand a customer, an order, a booking, a payment, cancellation. But it also needs to understand relationships, right? Like, how do you build up conversion? Like, what are the events that make up conversion? What's the relationship between products and what category they belong to? Which suppliers are available, is serving in which markets, which payment methods map to which processors, who owns the decision, like what are the guardrails around it? Because without all of that context, AI can still produce an answer, but obviously when AI produces an answer, it always sounds confident, right? Like you and I know that really well, but it can answer the wrong question. So I feel the way you define semantic layer, and I'm happy to go into a little more detail, but like it's the operating map of the business because it gives AI, like not only does it give AI the meaning, but it also gives the boundaries and the rails to sort of navigate it with. And it also gives it rules to sort of like reason safely and talk to it safely, basically.
Yeah, and some people call it the ontological layer. So yeah,
Ontology, yeah.
let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah,
So for the businesses you work with, I think this is almost a prerequisite for you
yeah,
to kind of onboard a customer. So how,
yeah,
maybe kind of from a practical standpoint, how do you go about it?
yeah,
Are they standard ontologies for a certain type of business, or retail is a retail is a retail? Or is
yeah,
it definitely specific because each business is kind of unique? So how do you
yeah,
go about, and in your discovery process, how, without getting into too much into the weeds, maybe
yeah,
kind of shed some
absolutely.
light?
Yeah, so absolutely. So with what we do, the semantic layer or the ontology is like really, really key, right? Like, and I'll answer both parts, which is what's sort of our approach for it and what's sort of like our ontology without getting in the weeds. And then second, like, what is sort of like the shared understanding and how does that sort of like work, right? So number one, with whatever our approach is, like one of the things that was important for us is that we can't sort of spend a year with the company with the customer to model all of that and sort of like say it'll take a year for you to model our ontology and then you'll get the value, right? So we look at it way more practically. We start with a particular use case, like is it conversion, is it bookability, is it payment approval monitoring, and not sort of boil the ocean and say, hey, we're gonna do all of this for your data. Because you have to be very precise and you have to pick one use case, auth rate and payments or whatever. Then I think what we do is for that particular use case, we'll map the events, dimensions, and entities. Like if you need an issuer, if you need a merchant, if you need sort of like a payment gateway, like let's bring that in. And then operational systems need to kind of understand the use case, right? So this is the ground for the D part of the deal, right? Like, because now you have like these sort of definitions and now you can actually start detecting. A lot of this can actually, the other practical thing, Patty, here is that a lot of this work might have already been done. So maybe you have your semantic definitions in warehouse, DBT, Looker, Tableau, or other tools. And some can be supplemented by bicycle zone vertical context. And then some of them probably needs validation. But that's the starting point. We're not saying we'll create it. We can also import everything that's sort of created. But that ontology serves the D part of it. But the more interesting thing that is attached to that ontology, that's adjacent to that ontology is the causes and actions. So if your KPI is revenue and you're saying revenue by region, the next step that you're saying is what happens when it drops, what happens when it spikes, what happens when the trend, which is more long term versus versus now, when the trend is off, or what happens to the forecast that's kind of looking into the future. So now you start looking at like how this KPI moves in the past, present, or the future, and you then start attaching actions and causes to it. What if there's a marketing thing? What if there's a technical thing? What if there's sort of like some other reason? And then you start attaching actions along with guardrails, post-action monitoring and everything else. So all of this is actually generative. And it's not some static documentation project, but you're kind of building, everything. But every time you act, sort of the system actually learns from the outcome, and the map or the ontology keeps evolving. But really, what you're saying is, what is the ontology that helps you go from signal to action? And you stick to it, right? It's not sort of like a super broad thing on, hey, we can model anything and we can do any workflow. We focus on the core responsibility of the ontology is that how do you go from signal to action? So you define them very clearly, and that's why we pick verticals, because verticals help really doing that. And to come to the second question, I think business problems or business decision making sort of doesn't live neatly in one system, right? You can have a retail sort of conversion drop, but it might look like a marketing problem, but the cause might be pricing or shipping promises or inventory or problems with checkout. Payments could be, it might on the surface look like fraud prevention, but it might be false decline, hurting good customers. So the shared understanding really kind of matters, help different teams like anchor on it and talk about it. And the business leader obviously cares the most about revenue and impact, but the analysts really also, they own the ontology, they own the quality of it, the definitions of it. But the semantic layer is what helps you translate, across these layers.
Yeah.
Hopefully that made
No,
sense and wasn't too technical. Yeah.
no, it was great. And I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It reminds me, I was kind of chuckling, it reminds me of an old quote. What's the difference between a terrorist and a modeler? Have you
Oh,
heard
yeah.
that one?
No, not that one. Yeah.
So you can negotiate with a terrorist.
Oh,
So,
got it. Got it. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a
and
good
why
one.
I bring that up is that your approach, and that might be your secret sauce, is
Yeah.
is very kind of reverse engineered. You're not trying to model the whole enterprise or the business. You're
Yeah.
very kind of tactical. It's
Focused on,
strategic, but it's very
yeah,
tactical
very
on the
tactical.
use case. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you're leveraging existing assets that the business might have
Yeah.
already built, like reports and maps
Yeah.
into action and things like that. So you're
Yeah.
sucking all that up. I'd call it reverse engineering, but
Yeah.
that's kind of your approach. You're kind of taking it all in
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
mapping it out for your agents so that
Yeah.
now they understand that whole workflow, that whole use case.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
they probably have an ontology within days, and if
Yeah.
there's AI doing this
Yeah.
itself,
Yeah.
I'm thinking it
Yeah.
happens like right
Well,
away when you
well,
engage.
actually, just to that point, we are, in a couple of weeks, we're launching self-service, right? And what's going to happen is for people in retail, travel, and payments, they can go to Bicycle, the website, start for free, and we call it Vibe Analytics, which is like a play on vibe coding, because vibe
Mhm.
coding, a prompt builds you an application, and Vibe Analytics, basically a prompt plus your data builds you an agent that does your analytics, right? Like that's the high level of it. But you can go, connect your data or upload your data, and it'll build the ontology, it'll build the agent. And there's also, again, if that's of interest, I can definitely also go into, there is the hierarchy for the semantic model and the ontology that needs to be done for the business. But it actually builds it out for you. It's going to be like, if you give me, like, let's say 6 or 8 months or 10 months of conversion data or payment approval data, etc., you'll have the ontology and all the use cases and the right questions to be asked in 15 minutes.
Wow. No, this is very powerful. And as an external observer, I think this is your secret sauce. This is kind of almost your
Correct.
differentiator in many ways.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Because
100%.
when I look at some public announcements, obviously Palantir kind of
Yeah,
popularized the semantic layer as a
for sure.
critical layer for AI transformation. But now, from everyone from Databricks in their recent conference, they're all
Yeah,
kind of launching, and they call it different things, context layer and things like that. But that
yeah,
entails a lot of work for an enterprise to use that
for
and
sure.
model their system. But
Yeah,
Bhaskar, you already have an approach that you
yeah, we do.
can
Yeah,
kind of take it from existing assets. And
yeah.
I think that's very powerful. Am I seeing it wrong? Meaning, I think this is a very powerful approach.
It is a very powerful approach. And, and the hierarchy I was talking about is that you have to sort of like really layer it. there is like a normalized way of looking at an enterprise, right? Like there's a customer, there's a transaction, there's a product that you're selling, there's an account for the customer, there's an event, there's a owner, etc. But there are vertical concepts. Like when you go into retail, you're like, I have SKUs, I have inventory, I have promotions, I have delivery, merchandising, etc. Payments has authorization, decline codes, issuers. But then you go a layer up, you'll have sub verticals. Like, are you a card provider? Are you a buy now, pay later? And they have different constructs. Then you go a layer up. The final level is the company, their definitions, their policies, their exceptions, their rules. And that is sort of like that layer. So agents will share common business objects, but the last mile is very, very specific to a company. That's where you actually create the value. But you have to start with you have to have a starting point, and that's where the sort of core knowledge of the LLMs works so well, because you'd be surprised how much an LLM actually knows about your company, right, and your model and everything else, because a lot of that is public domain knowledge. So you tune the model enough to you get the model enough to give it enough context to sort of like really create that very, very specific ontology on top of a shared, layered model. And that in itself is so powerful, because the time to value, you're just cutting that down to such a small number.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. I can see the value, and in retail, and I work a lot in financial services, payments being part of that, but
Yeah,
just a banking business, like a wholesale banking business, for example, a cash management
absolutely.
business, and
Yeah,
corporate banking, or even consumer banking, and you brought about BNPL and things like that, even the credit
yeah.
side of
Even the
the
credit side.
house.
Yeah,
Yeah, this could be huge.
yeah.
And yeah, I see what you're saying, that it's hierarchical, or kind of layered in
Just
some
layered.
ways,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's how businesses operate. No, I
Sure.
love it. Um,
Yeah.
Definitely. Have you authored any papers on this? I mean, this is very interesting to me, the
Yeah,
semantic
yeah.
aspect, the ontology aspect.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think we're just starting to get into that zone where like you start thinking about like, parents and everything else. Obviously there is and for us the bigger thing is that it's actually very, very specific, right? Like if you look at the Palantir model, and definitely what they've done is also part of the inspiration, right? But they do it in a very, very broad manner. They're like a operating platform. You can actually do a variety of things. For us, it's very focused. It's sort of like signal to action, it's decision making, especially in real time. And that's the only ontology we really care about. Like, how do you go from signal to action and then accommodate different types of data? But I feel like that is the future of analytics. It's not just asking questions, but like how does it become like really, really proactive?
Yeah, no, definitely. So we touched on the semantic ontology layer, which is kind
Yeah,
of well, we started with agentic, so agentic and the
yeah.
semantic layer, two primary building blocks of
Primary
AI
building blocks. Yeah,
transformation, and we focused, looked at your verticals and some use cases.
sure. Yeah,
Another area I have been researching is, and it's related to retail,
yeah.
and payments and other thing, is agentic commerce.
Oh, yeah. That's a good
So
one. Yeah,
yeah, so let's maybe talk about that. It's kind of
yeah.
a
Sure.
different use case, if you will. So
Yeah,
customer journeys are becoming increasingly fragmented. So
yeah,
the top of the funnel, research and discovery, right? So I'm doing a home improvement. I go to ChatGPT or Gemini and
yeah.
ask, okay, here's my home and I want to do this.
Sure. Yeah,
And so I'm discovering there. So across, and sometimes Reddit and social platforms are involved.
absolutely.
And I
Yeah,
was at a conference last week in New York, and they were talking about this, right? So the research and discovery, which typically a merchant or a retail business or a specialized business,
yeah.
L'Oreal actually announced a partnership with OpenAI yesterday. I don't know whether you caught it.
Oh,
They're
nice.
they're
Okay.
working with yeah, they're working with OpenAI on some of the kind of the healthcare, the skincare, kind of the science behind. They're building specific agents and stuff like
Yeah,
that, so
yeah.
that you don't do it outside of the L'Oreal surface, if
Sure.
you will.
Yeah, yeah,
Now,
yeah.
after the research and discovery, then getting into the cart and purchasing may happen through marketplaces, merchant
Yeah,
websites, or AI shopping agents. I think Gemini wants to do that. And
yeah,
then post purchase service typically is done at the merchant
correct.
property. Usually,
Yeah,
it could be a merchant agent tomorrow, but usually calling the merchant or their
yeah,
website and stuff like that. But
yeah,
kind of that funnel is changing, the operating
absolutely.
model is changing. So
Yeah,
how do you see, given that you work with retailers and travel is a big vertical
yeah,
for this,
absolutely.
how
Yeah.
do you see this changing the operating model for retailers, merchants, and others?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And yeah, this is one of the like super exciting areas right now. I feel like one thing that's going to definitely happen, which is obvious from this, is that merchants are going to lose control over like just the front door. Like, I mean, a lot of times it just used to be like, hey, I just need to manage my storefront, and then I just need to think about the channels that are coming to it, like whether it's search or paid social or marketplace or whatever it is. But now I can have my discovery in like ChatGPT or or Instagram or like a shopping assistant that's kind of working through it, and they might not always start on the merchant side. You're just finding your object that you like, and AI is helping you find what you like, find what's suitable for you, find you the right deal based on your experiences, because AI now has so much context. And so they might ask an agent for a recommendation, compare, and then they're ready to buy. So that basically changes the operating model, right? Because what the merchant has to make sure is that the product data or the pricing, the availability, this it's almost like this headless revolution that's happening because AI can do so many things. This is also like the headless sort of like angle coming in. It has to understand that demand signals are not cleanly tied to a channel, so you have to kind of really improvise. But you have to make sure that if an AI agent is recommending your product, can you actually do the fulfillment part of it? Are you up to date with it? Are you sort of like running all of that really cleanly? So basically, what's going to happen is that the underlying model, the underlying engine that's running this headless sort of like commerce on top, it's becoming much more real time, but also like cross functional. And multiple teams like commerce, data, payments, etc., will just have to have a shared operating view. But I think that's really, and I can talk more about like what my thoughts are with respect to bicycle, but like that's how I see that changing.
Yeah, no, let's touch on that. So, how do you see
Yeah,
bicycle playing in this new ecosystem? You talked about headless, so
yeah,
retailers, instead of just having their sites, they expose everything through an MCP server or APIs for other agents to consume,
yeah,
including Gemini and ChatGPT, but maybe other third-party agents as well.
yeah, yeah.
So it's a very kind of wide funnel. How the
Quite
channel
fun.
is very kind of diverse. So
Yeah,
yeah, how
for sure.
does someone
Yeah.
like Bicycle AI play in this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, if you think about it, like bicycle is sort of like the engine underneath that's helping with intelligence and action and sort of like decision making for the operator, right? Because I think it'll start with the agent, the shopping agent, understanding, oh, well, actually resolving or figuring out, like helping the customer decide what to buy. You'll have a customer service agent that's helping resolve a problem, right? But the bottom line is who runs the business? It's the merchant. The merchant still has to run the business. They need to know what changed across, products, inventory, channel, et cetera, right? So if you look at bicycle, what is its role? If let's say, let's take a scenario and play it out, right? Like, so let's say demand changes because a product is being recommended by an AI surface, and that demand is the shift. So if bicycle can detect the shift, if conversion drops, if conversion is dropping because inventory is stale, then bicycle can explain it. Like if you detect the shift in the previous example, then you figure out like the why. Why is it actually happening? Pinpoint to the latest cause. And again, it doesn't have to be all about facing issues, but opportunities are the other side of revenue leaks. They are sort of like, what do you want to double down on? What product is hot? So once you get that, and some of our customers also do that, in terms of like jumping on opportunities. If a promotion is driving traffic but hurting margin, like bicycle can surface that quickly. You don't want to know that in the Monday morning brief after you suffered the whole week, right? So
Right.
yeah, obviously, so bicycle is not obviously in the layer of consumer shopping. It's not a consumer shopping agent or anything. It is the operating layer that helps the merchant really kind of run it, and sort of like really thrive in a world where it's like really fragmented but very automated, because you need AI to kind of run this like engine that's feeding a lot of like the headless experience that's happening outside.
So almost a control plane, right? To
Correct. Correct.
help the retailer, help the
Yeah.
e-commerce side, if you will.
Correct.
And
Correct.
even though you said you're not in the kind of the Gemini or the ChatGPT or in the
Yeah.
front,
Yeah.
but you could observe, say, for example, the AEO, and that's the big term now, right? The
Yeah. Basically,
optimization of the products
of the product.
in an LLM. So, but you could, one of the signals you could detect is that it's not being described, and that's probably why the traffic is not coming in, or something like that.
Correct. Correct.
You could
Correct. Yeah.
potentially detect things like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Shifts and meaningful shifts.
Right. And so what, so if you were advising a retailer,
Hmm.
not just on the observability part of Bicycle, but just the
Overall.
shifting agentic commerce operating model, going headless obviously was one of the things.
Yeah.
Um, what new capabilities would you recommend that they
Yeah.
start to need thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it starts with what you're really selling, and that's sort of like your product and inventory, right? If a lot of these recommendations are coming from agents, the underlying data has to be solid, has to be really accurate. And a lot of times people suffer from like issues with catalogs, issues with like stale availability, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one thing that, you need to make sure you're really solid on. Second, now let's go to the next part of it, which is like pricing and promotion. Like, how much are you selling it for? Like, what's the promotions you're doing? Agents will make comparison easier, but you know, like you need to understand when the discounts are helping, when they're hurting, when the margins are bad because you've discounted too much, and when competitors are basically changing the game, changing the context, right? Some of our customers already actually scrape competition prices and use reasoning to actually, and that's a really good phenomenon in quick commerce. So that's the second part of it. Third, now move further down, like the pricing is done, the intent is there, people are actually checking out. You need your systems to be very resilient with respect to checkout. A lot of people have checkout issues. You can have the best discovery in the world, but you need to be completing the transaction, right? Like that's the highest intent step. And if you're failing there, that's an issue. But underneath it all, they need two things, right? One is real time, like operating intelligence. And again, obviously, that's where Bicycle comes in. So, um, that's sort of like a link there. But like I was saying, you can't wait for Monday morning report. Like you have constantly a lot of this happening. And if you don't have like a closed loop decision making type of system with sort of like, real explainability, real reasoning, then when demand moves quickly, shifts, or when a margin issue comes up in promotions, you can't really solve it. And then finally, I think this goes without saying anytime AI is used, but like safety and audit trails and guardrails, approvals, because that's one of the things that you can't work around. You have to have all of those. And I think it's not, but it's definitely, what I can tell you is that it's definitely not more dashboards, right? They need to have these systems that can serve that whole headless type of like experience. They'll be the ones who can sense what's happening and respond quickly. But what you don't want to do is lose control. So you have to have some of that in place.
Yeah, and you're already in the retail, so it could be a
Correct.
great upsell opportunity for you as they
100%.
look into the
I
agentic
still look into
commerce
that.
journey. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And it's probably good news for your investors and for you as well,
Sure.
but
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
a
Absolutely. Yeah.
huge
Yeah,
growth
for sure.
opportunity. So, this was great. We covered
Yeah.
a lot about good stuff. So, just looking ahead, where do you see Bicycle's biggest growth opportunity? Oh,
Yeah.
not just this year, but over the next 2 to
Over
5
the next.
years.
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
expansion primarily within your existing industries, or do you see entirely new verticals emerging? So
Sure.
where's your growth?
Yeah, no, I think our biggest opportunity is still like going deep because these verticals are pretty big. They're very large markets, and then we're still pretty early on the maturity of it, right? So we're definitely not thinking let's go like as horizontal as possible as quickly as we can, but where are sort of like high frequency revenue critical decisions, and then really getting people to change behavior of this is how they're operating like takes a really long time. And so retail travel and payments presents a lot of that, opportunity. But again, as we grow, I think, and as we sort of like really get the engine to become sort of like really, really vertical, where you don't actually have to do a lot of work for a particular vertical, which is already the case for us. Then you can start looking at marketplaces, logistics, maybe insurance, and all of those kind of areas. But I think the winning strategy is that, look, how do you build like a true vertical kind of agent? And the difference is that a generic AI layer can answer questions, but then the vertical agent actually knows what are the questions that matter. And there's a big difference, right? You have to go deep enough and understand the vertical, not just their data, right, that they gave
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
So going back to our semantic or ontological layer, meaning
correct, correct, correct,
knowing the business becomes very
correct,
important.
correct. Absolutely, 100%.
Cool, cool. Yeah, I did research the Long Lake acquisition of American Express Travel. I want to briefly ask you about that. Kind of,
Yeah,
I saw it as Long Lake being an AI transformation kind of arm of General Catalyst.
yeah,
They wanted to take in GBTG, or the American Express Travel business, which is a public company, even
sure.
though has the American Express name. And wanted to kind of streamline its operation, kind of
Yeah,
along the lines, if I may
lines of
say, of
sure.
what Bicycle promises to do
Yeah,
for its
yeah,
clients. So
yeah.
what's your thought? Did you track that? It was like a month ago, I think, the Long Lake acquisition of American Express Travel.
Yeah, a little bit, but again, I think that layer is obviously, super important, but I haven't done sort of anything in detail about that. I caught that briefly. But my high level is that like, I think the way and kind of plays into like this whole agentic commerce type of thing on the way business is going to be done, whether it's sort of like retail or travel, especially discovery and finding things and doing all of that type of stuff, is going to change. And that's why I feel like you'll see movement in that area. Does that make
Yeah, yeah.
sense? Yeah,
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 totally. And
yeah.
I think it's a great validation for what you are doing because
100%.
yeah. And the other thing, obviously, kind of looking at some of the other trends, right?
Yeah,
OpenAI and Anthropic, they all have these big services
yeah,
organization
yeah,
which are going to work on enterprise operational transformation using AI,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
which also I think is fundamentally what Bicycle is doing. Obviously, you have a limited
Yeah, absolutely.
focus, you're focusing on a few
Just
verticals,
a few verticals. Yeah.
but I see it as validation of your fundamental thesis,
Yeah.
don't you?
No, absolutely, 100%. Because I think the 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 zoom out sort of like view, which I think I really like, is basically that enterprise AI is going into the implementation phase. That's the part, right? It's high time, right? Like we go into that. And I think what people don't understand is that just because the models came out, it's not the whole product. You can connect it to data and everything will work, because the enterprises are complex. Like we talked about, we need to understand the business. We need to understand the data, their workflows, their policies, the fragmentation that exists in the company. And all of this needs to sort of like happen. So there's really two pathways to that, right? One is you take a model, and you build services capabilities that really get you to the last mile, and it's very bespoke, and like there are different agentic workflows that you're building out, right? But then there's the other part of it, right, where product companies like Bicycle come in, because enterprises will also need packaged, domain-aware systems that are governed, and they're solving recurring business problems like decision making, because again, there's a lot of commonality in conversion, payment approvals, volume, decline, bookability. How do you basically just run these in closed decision loop systems? So it's sort of like got enough boundaries where we can actually solve that. And those are the two sides. Like you can actually implement a lot of it in bespoke services, but you need sort of like the packaging, you need the governance on top of it, you need sort of like domain aware systems. So that's really kind of what we're building. And it's kind of a new class, especially as they appeal more to the vertical parts of it.
True, true. And that's what I said in the introduction, right? You're
Yeah,
almost defining and executing on a new category. So
yeah,
well said, that answer, services versus product and the capability. I love your approach as to how you're
yeah,
going about it. It
yeah,
doesn't have a lot of overhead. It re-engineers or reuses an existing enterprise or business assets,
yeah,
and you're giving quick lift and answering quick questions.
yeah,
So no, I love it. And I love your statement, enterprise AI is going into implementation, and
yeah,
companies like Bicycle AI are like just forefront in their
yeah,
approach, obviously focusing on a few verticals, but
yeah,
focused on that transformational journey.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and before we close, say if I asked you to take out your crystal ball, looking
Yeah,
ahead 10 years,
sure.
of what does enterprise operating model look like? What becomes
Yeah,
autonomous? What remains fundamentally human? Um,
yeah,
paint a future picture for
yeah,
us,
yeah,
Bhaskar.
absolutely. So I feel like a lot of the routine operation stuff will become autonomous or like semi-autonomous, right? Because in operations detection on like again, not to go back to deal again, but like detection will be, autonomous where the triaging of like what needs to be done will be very sort of heavily assisted with AI. That'll be linked up with reporting, and then a lot of low risk actions will also happen without a lot of human involvement, like, creating tickets, routing issues, um, sending updates to partners, adjusting low risk settings and generating reviews and things like that. I think all of that should be handled autonomously. But I don't think enterprises will fully become autonomous in sometimes how people imagine. If I were to think about like two or three things that humans will own, right? It starts with strategy, right? Like how people again, in the most sort of explosive segment where AI is taken off, which is coding, right? People keep talking about taste, like taste matters, and the strategy matters, like what you want to do, how you want to do it, like so that strategy matters. And then if you go down a little below that into tactics, within tactics, judgment, right? Like, and judgment basically comes with, picking the right trade-off. And that's sort of like, again, owned by human. But ultimately, I think if you have an organization, the reason it's an organization being run by people is that the main thing will be accountability. I mean, can't be owned by AI, right? Like it's going to be something. So AI can tell you like a margin issue is caused by a promotion, but a human still has to decide, like, what am I doing? Am I protecting margin? Am I aggressive and growing share? Am I rewarding loyal customers? Am I sort of like taking on this competition or not? Do I actually have this as part of my strategy? So I'm doing the strategy there. I am figuring out like what is the right judgment call, because my judgment call is a complex tree of trade-offs. I pick the trade-off and I go with that decision. And you have to balance revenue, you have to balance risk, and then also like regulation. But like the judgment, the accountability part, that'll stay. So humans will be in the loop, but they'll be in the right point in the loop, and they're not doing sort of like a lot of the day-to-day work. Like again, going back to bicycle, the analysts are not sort of like doing the queries, doing the data cuts and everything else. They're just like reviewing the strategy that the agent comes up with and sort of blessing it, and but are also accountable for it, right?
Yeah, no,
That's
fascinating.
how I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, fascinating. Thank you for that, sharing that.
Yeah.
And we do live in interesting times,
Yeah.
and things are majorly changing. But thanks for articulating it
Of course.
as to what the human element might still mean in this
Yeah.
age of AI as things mature, obviously in
Yeah.
5 to 10 years.
Absolutely.
Bhaskar, this has been fascinating. Where can people follow your work or connect with you? Who are you looking to connect with? If you want to
Yeah.
describe, I have a wide variety of listeners from
Great.
VC
Great.
types, investors to startup to people
Yeah.
looking for their next big startup. So feel free to
Awesome.
address everyone you want to.
100%. Yeah. I feel like for the company, obviously the best place, is the website, and then obviously LinkedIn, is the other place. Always up for having conversations with, people who are, dealing with high volume, high velocity, just revenue critical operations. I mean, that's been like my constant thread, even from the AppD days, especially in the verticals I talked about. Obviously, that's going to be an even more relevant conversation. If I get super specific, then heads of e-commerce, heads of payments, marketplace operators, travel leaders, but also most importantly, data and analytics leaders on how Bicycle becomes a cursor for them, for their team, how it really enables it. So those are people I'd love to connect with. We are coming up with, like, we are going to launch, self-service in the next 2-3 weeks. So that'll be incredible. I'm excited about that, and I want to get feedback on how we're approaching the problem. I'd love for them to just try it out. You know, I don't know when the episode will drop, but it might be pretty close to our launch, and so I'd love for them to just go on Bicycle and start trying, self-service. Because the common pattern is that you have data, you have dashboards, but like it takes too long to understand why something's moving and acting on it, and that's basically the problem we're focused on. So I'd love to talk to anyone who's interested in that, especially in the space that I basically mentioned.
Yeah, no, awesome. I think we'll drop in the next week or so, so it might be a good
Yeah,
timing. And
yeah,
and yeah, I because of my coverage on agentic commerce, I have a lot of the retail, the head of commerce, or
yeah,
and there's this new role, head of like AI transformation in retail. So
yeah,
those
yeah,
folks, I think, hope they're listening and they'll check out. And it's
yeah.
bicycle.io, right? Or
AI,
bicycle.ai.
bicycle or AI. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Bicycle.ai,
Correct.
and check them out. And Bhaskar Sunkara on LinkedIn if you
On
want to
LinkedIn.
connect with him directly.
Yeah,
Bhaskar, your career has followed a fascinating progression.
yeah.
AppD or App Dynamics helped enterprise understand the health of their software.
Hmm.
Bicycle AI is helping enterprise understand the health of their business
Business.
and
Yeah,
proactively manage it. The
yeah,
next chapter may be enterprise that don't simply observe and understand, but
yeah.
continuously reason, adapt, and
Reason.
improve.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us on FinTech Talk, Bhaskar.
Yeah, thank you, Patty. I really enjoyed this, and thanks for super super awesome questions, and yeah, thanks for the time. This was great.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
awesome.
Take care. Mhm.